Welcome to the FCS Edge, where we predict the Week 11 schedule won't have a single ounce of chaos in it. If you believe that, Zach McKinnell is standing by to sell you some terrific swampland. I'm Craig Haley of Stats Perform and TheAnalyst.com, along with co-host Zach McKinnell of FCS Football Central on SI. Zach, is your head still spinning from Week 10?
Yeah, I mean, this weekend was chaos, man, and we were really close to having a handful of other chaotic results that really could have shook up the rankings playoff race. So ready to break it all down, Craig, and I'm sure our pick 'em be 100% this week because last week it was a little rough at points.
Well, as usual, Graham Bell is our producer, and this week we have a special episode. Not only are Zach and I talking Week 10 chaos, Week 11 picks and predictions, but we have two special guests. Mark Wharton, who's the athletic director at Chattanooga. He's the FCS Playoff Selection Committee chair. We have Ty Halpin of the NCAA. He's the director of championships and alliances for Division I. We are ready to talk Field of 24 with Mark and Ty. But let's go back to a chaotic Week 10. We talked about how conference results are just all over the place. That's when you get your most upsets. There were 8 top 25 teams that lost, 6 of them to unranked teams. That was by far the most of this year. I think maybe 5 top 25 wins was the high before that. What did you think? Tell us about maybe your most surprising upset of the week.
Yeah, I think it's not surprising of what I thought was the most surprising. It was definitely Indiana State knocking off South Dakota State. And I understand that Chase Mason was out of the game and they were missing another handful of contributors. But that game was a little bit of an inexcusable loss for them. There were so many missed opportunities. And I think what's happened with this Chase Mason injury, Craig, is we saw there were a handful of flaws with this team with Chase Mason, and what his absence has done has only magnified what those issues are, which has they haven't been super explosive running the football. Their offensive line hasn't been winning the line of scrimmage battle. And now you're seeing turnovers come into effect here where they don't have a guy like Chase Mason who's a bit more experienced and a little bit more accurate with the football. When you have a redshirt freshman in there, Craig, he's going to make freshman mistakes, and those are starting to kind of catch up with them. And then I think the other thing too is you look at them on 4th down. I understand the aggressiveness and the analytics might be saying to go for it, but they've been abysmal at 4th down conversions this year. I think they ranked 4th to last in the nation in 4th down conversions. You've got to think there has to be some sort of schematical or fundamental change with how they approach those 4th downs, because right now it's going to cost them games if we keep going down the same path.
Yeah, Zach, they have to certainly finish drives, which they didn't do against Indiana State. I mean, 24-12 to only score 12 points is just, something we haven't seen in a long time. I think at the same time, we can't just look at what's happening in the moment. All it takes is one game. We're all waiting on Chase Mason to come back. They're certainly young behind him at quarterback. If they come back and look good, everybody will, breathe a sigh of relief. Fans, the team. But that's the key. They need to get Chase Mason back. But that was certainly the biggest upset in just a wild week. It really had an impact in the top 25, our Stats Perform FCS top 25. I mean, number 2, Tarleton also lost to Abilene Christian. We now have North Dakota State 1, Montana's up to 2, Montana State's 3, Lehigh and Tennessee 4 and 5. They're undefeated. We mentioned Tarleton dropping to 6. It's I think 22 out of 25 spots changed from a week ago. It's almost a domino effect. And as a voter, you just really have to do double takes half the time.
Yeah, I don't know how many ballots I had to fill out this past weekend trying to figure out, because every time I thought I had what I wanted, I would talk myself into changing something different. So it's really, and it's funny. We're gonna talk to the playoff committee chair later, and I'm sure they do the same thing. Where it's like, how do you find the perfect balance between advanced metrics, power ratings, eye tests, head to head, strength of schedule? I mean, there's just so much think of and kind of put into and take into account. And it's like every single voter, Craig, we have 50 plus voters. I'm sure every single one of them probably values and weights things differently. And how does that all even out in the aggregate? So I think it's a really tough process, but I thought overall, like it turned out about how I expected. There were just a few, like my ballot only differed a little bit, but I thought it was very interesting to see how people judged a Tarleton State for losing their first game of the year compared to South Dakota State losing without their starting quarterback. And Tennessee Tech might their strength of schedule might be atrocious, but they continue to look impressive on the field when you watch them. Same for Harvard. So it's very interesting to see how the voters all kind of take all this information to account and try to sparse it out in their ballot.
Well, Tennessee Tech is one of three teams that can earn an automatic bid to the playoffs this weekend. That's a two step scenario. Tennessee Tech would have to beat Eastern Illinois, and UT Martin would have to lose to Tennessee State. Both would have to happen in the OBC Big South for Tennessee Tech to get a bid. But two of them are just straight wins. North Dakota State going to North Dakota, they can claim the Missouri Valley bid, and Mercer in the Southern Conference, great game going to Western Carolina. They can clinch the automatic bid with a victory over Western Carolina. What are some of your thoughts on the potential 20 field of 24 as it's taking place coming into shape?
I'm gonna be very curious to see what the bubble looks like, especially if we have some of these like uh, chaos scenarios, you could call them, where maybe the team that we're all projecting to get the auto bid right now doesn't in some of these conferences that may have been a one bid league. Like what happens if Tennessee Tech stumbles and something crazy happens and they don't get the auto bid, Craig? They're gonna be in the playoffs. Well, what does that do now for a potential sixth Missouri Valley team or a second or third SoCon team or the UAC even potentially? And so I think that's going to be the biggest thing. And then also too, what like Abilene Christian could win the auto bid right now in the UAC. Now that puts Tarleton taking away an at-large bid. So there's a handful of the bubble shrinking scenarios that really could change this race. And so I think that's what I'm looking at most of this field of 24 is how tight the bubble is. 'Cause I do feel like the top of this field is pretty set. They might not; those teams might not be locks, and anything can happen, Craig. But there's a handful of teams that I think are securely positioned themselves to be in this field. So I'm really looking at that bottom half of this field of 24 right now.
Well, you just mentioned six team in the Missouri Valley Conference, and an Abilene Christian maybe getting an automatic bid. I feel like it's maybe changed over time. Where earlier in this year, you made a great point. You said that you probably had to go 8-4 in a 12-game schedule to get an at-large. Six teams coming out of one conference isn't going to happen. I think you were right, but it looks like it's changed. At least in my eyes, I can see a Missouri Valley Conference getting six. They really have seven contenders for bids right now. Or Abilene Christian, they have, by beating Tarleton, that was their fourth top 25 win. If they don't get the auto bid, maybe they're a 7-5 team. Maybe a Youngstown State or Southern Illinois. Southern Illinois probably has to get to 8 because they have a sub Division One win. But do you think it's changed that now you can see six teams in a conference or a 7-5, division wins at large team?
I mean, there's a path, right? Like you look at a team like South Dakota winning last weekend over North Dakota was a huge advantage here, and I think if they can knock off South Dakota State this weekend, they put themselves in a really good position to finish 8-4, and they'll have a chance at it at large. But what happens if they drop these next two? Does a 7-5 South Dakota team get in? I don't know, because there's a chance Lamar could be on the bubble, and they have the head-to-head over South Dakota. So what does the committee do with that? Lamar might not have the strength to schedule, but they did win head-to-head, and that was when South Dakota was healthy. Like they didn't beat a beat up South Dakota team. They beat them when they were healthy, and Lamar's fought through some injuries and continue to win. They get upset this past weekend. I think the two that I'm looking at the closest is Illinois State and Southern Illinois. They got some tough schedules down the stretch, and I honestly think what's going to determine it is that Southern Illinois State game the last week of the year. Is that a possible elimination game? Does the loser of that game get in? And so if the loser doesn't, can a South Dakota position themselves to get in at 7-5? So that's going to be the key. There's a path, but I still think it's going to be tough. I think the team that's best positioned to make it at 7-5 would be an Abilene Christian potentially because they have the 4 ranked wins. They're going to finish with the top 10 strength of schedule. And I mean, Craig, it's weird, right? Because their overall record isn't great, but they probably have a top 10 resume right now out of all the teams in the country. So I think Abilene Christian is probably the team I would say has the best chance to make it in at 7-5.
Yeah, I think going into this week, 3 weeks left of the regular season, many people might say, "Oh, 7-5 is going to do it," but when we get to that point, November 22nd, final Saturday, and you look at resumes, like people will start to say, "Yeah, you know what? We need to get a 7-5 team in." That could be an Abilene Christian, but they could also just win out and make it easy and go in an automatic bid of the UAC with Tarleton. Tarleton, they suffered their first loss. They started 9-1. They lose on a walk-off field goal at Abilene Christian. I had mentioned Todd Whitten was my pick going into the year for Eddie Robinson Award, and I felt that way last week when you and I talked about it. That's a tough one to do. I mean, w- just going back to that, did your Eddie Robinson pick change off of last week at all? Who's your pick right now?
If I It's tough because there's there's so many good picks. Like Joel Taylor's still really hot for me. I know that West Georgia's not playoff eligible and they're not undefeated right now, but to see what he's done with that team has been, I mean, insane. Eric in North Dakota, right? Like I know they got upset this weekend, but Craig, that like UND's been so good this year, and look at what that program's done. But I still think if I'm going to vote today, it's got to be Bobby Water right now for me. What he's done with Tennessee Tech, Craig, is just if they finish undefeated against the FCS, or just imagine if they knock off a really bad Kentucky team in the SEC, how big of an FBS win that would be. If they find a way to do either one of those things, finish 11-1, finish 12-0, I think Bobby Wilder would get my pick because to me, I value a coach that took a program who's not historically good. I vote them higher than a coach who, and this is no offense, and I know Vegan and Polisek have been in this conversation before. I value what Bobby Waters done at Tennessee Tech over what those two guys have done at their respective schools because those schools are always good, and so I think I would lean a Bobby Water in this conversation right now.
I agree. That's a great pick. It also sounds like Deshaun Jackson when you talk about what he's done at Delaware State. So that's
Yes.
another good one. All right, so that's Eddie Robinson Award. Let me just ask, kind of rapid fire here. Let's go some of the other FCS awards. We got 3 weeks left of the regular season. The Jerry Rice Award, National Freshman of the Year. Who's your pick?
Yeah, Braden Atkinson. Not particularly close right now, Craig. I think Caden Pennick kind of took a step back. He missed a game due to injury or due to sickness. I guess illness was more the correct diagnosis there. And then he kind of cost UC Davis the game last week. You expect that from a redshirt freshman, but Craig, I'm going to be honest here. Braden Atkinson is going to win the Jerry Rice Award. I'm not completely unsure that he doesn't belong in the Walter Payton discussion with how he's playing. I mean, he is playing at an elite level, and we're not talking just freshman All-American for Braden Atkinson, Craig. There's a real strong conversation that he should be an All-American for the entire FCS. He is playing elite football right now, and he's a big reason why Mercer right now looks like they can make a push, Craig, for May. I know they can't go super high in that top 8 seed, but it wouldn't surprise me if Mercer wins out to see them in that top 8 seed conversation range for the 7 or 8 seed this year.
Well, then let me put you on the spot. Who's your pick for the Walter Payton FCS Offensive Player of the Award year at this moment? Who would be your pick right now?
Oh, man, I would have my top 3 kind of sorted out. It would be Teron Dickens, it would be Bo Brungard, it would be Cole Payton. Dickens and Brungard are shortening the gap this past weekend because I didn't think Cole had a great statistical game. But if you watch the film, Craig, it is really, really hard to argue against that Cole Payton's the best FCS player right now. I would give it to Cole Payton right now just based on the film. But if Teron Dickens gets Western Carolina over the Mercer hump, and he finishes out undefeated as a starter, there's a real strong argument for him. And Bo Brungard, Craig, is doing something we haven't seen in a long time. He is one of the most versatile weapons in college football, and I'm really, really impressed what he's doing. And I thought he outplayed Cole Payton for the most part this past weekend on the road in Fargo.
Yeah, he's over 2,000 passing yards, over 1,000 rushing yards. It's the 17th time it's happened in the FCS. 16 players have done it, a total of 17 times. So yeah, he's just been phenomenal. Actually, Tommy Mellott did it last year for Montana State, and he won the Peyton. So I agree. All those candidates are right there. Maybe I throw in Rodney Nelson for running back out of Monmouth. We've talked Michael Wortham, just his versatility, wide receiver for Montana. But the amount of quarterbacks that you can make a case for is just phenomenal. All right, one more. You mentioned Braden Atkinson of Mercer. I know you like somebody for the Buck Buchanan Award. Tell us about who your pick there.
Yeah, it would probably still be Andrew Zock. I know statistically he's not just leading the country in sacks or tackles for loss, but I want to say he's top 5 in both. When I just watched the film, he is the most impactful defensive player in the country, in my opinion, and I've really valued that. And I think for this Buck Buchanan Award, Craig, it is so important to watch the film, and I also think it's important for voters to understand football for this award because it's easy just to go watch the stats, right? And that's no and listen, if Joshua Stone King or Lando Brown or someone like that wins it, I won't be upset because they deserve it, right? They're having excellent seasons too. But when you're looking at just who is the best defensive player in the FCS, it's really hard to go against Zoc. And I want to throw a dark horse out here for you. He's not going to win it because voters look at the stats so much, but Damian Henderson at Harvard at cornerback is having an insane year. I mean, he is suffocating opposing wide receivers and just choking them out in one-on-one coverage. And he is one of the highest graded players in the country. I think he's only allowed like 20 yards total, Craig, in coverage this year. He's been outstanding to watch, but I know how hard it is for DBs to win it. Only one's done it, and Rasheed Mathis had about 100 interceptions in a year. So it takes a lot for a DB to get on that radar.
Zach, I think of John Madden with the telestrator. I know you with the remote. When that defensive player makes a tackle, I can hear you go boom. So I could see you watching game film in my head right now. That's so awesome. All right, we're going to take a break here from the FCS Edge. Our second segment that's coming up. Great guest this week. We have Mark Wharton, the FCS Playoff Selection Committee Chair, Ty Halpin of the NCAA. We are ready to talk the entire process that goes into selecting the FCS playoff field. So we're going to take a break, and as we go to break of the FCS Edge, we're going to look at the Week 10 Stats Reform FCS National Players and Teams of the Week. This is the FCS Edge. Welcome back to the FCS Edge. Zach and I are pleased to be joined by not one, but two special guests. Mark Wharton, the athletic director at Chattanooga and the FCS Playoff Selection Committee Chair, and Ty Halpin, the NCAA Director of Championships and Alliances for Division I. He works closely with the selection committee. Gentlemen, how you doing today?
Doing awesome. Thank you for having us on.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. Great to see you guys.
Appreciate having you on. Let's get right to it. Last year, the first time you seeded 1 through 16 in the 2014 field, what kind of impact did going 1 through 16 versus just having 8 seeds have? Did it benefit the selection committee?
It added a nuance that we worked very hard early on from August to obviously selections to make sure not only the top 8, we kind of did it in top 4, top 8, top 12, top 16, that we dug in a little bit more on strength of schedules, the other metrics that we use, watching games as we got closer, that we made sure that we watched the actual games against opponents, and had a lot of robust conversations when we were in Indy. And I feel like, all in all, we got it right. If you saw the games and how it played out, that it was exciting. And doing that same kind of work this year with the new committee members, and just really excited about going to Indy and getting it right.
Yeah, Craig, I would add that, the top 16, that 9 through 16, made a lot of the kind of the site selections or reviewing those things much simpler. I think from a logistical standpoint, it made that part of it much more clear cut.
Can you guys kind of summarize on what was gained for some of the metrics y'all use, especially like last year, like the KPI, the ESP and FPI, the massive ratings? How do you guys balance those with what you guys see on film when you guys watch the games?
Well, really, metrics are really very, very secondary. I mean, we really rely on the regional advisory committees. We watch, Ty and I talked about it recently. By the time we get to Indianapolis, we'll watch about 50 games and are very intentional about who those are early on. Cross conference, games that might end up in the playoffs. And then, really the metrics come in as we've talked about it. When we get down to the last 8, the last 4 in, first 4 out, that a lot of discussions are around that. We've looked at it about individual, the predictive, and then the other metrics. But again, all of them are based on a short period of measurement. And so I really think the eye test, the conversations with those regional racks, and really honestly watching games. And so that's from a committee's perspective of how we use those metrics.
Yeah, I would only add that KPI and Ken Massey and the ESPN folks, I think were really upfront and very helpful in explaining kind of how they develop their metrics to the committee in terms that those of us that aren't mathematicians understand a little bit better. And really, not to overvalue it. I think that's the tendency. We all love numbers. It'd be a lot easier if we just went straight by numbers. But in football, it just doesn't fit for the sport, especially in FCS, where there's a wide variety of different approaches that conferences take to scheduling, to scholarships, to everything. And so we really do have to weigh watching games and really understanding what each team brings to the table. And hopefully we get those right. Not everybody's going to agree with the decisions that the committee makes, but I think it's helpful. But I would caution against overestimating how much it comes into the final decision.
Well, gentlemen,
Absolutely.
the field of 24, your pairings will be here before you know it. I mean, you're going to announce them on November 23rd on an ESPNU selection show. One of the differences this year is having the Ivy League gaining an automatic bid, an 11th conference with a bid, and then you'll have 13 at-large candidates. Right now, Harvard's leading the Ivy League race, but how much of a difference is it for Ivy League at-large candidates to only play 10 regular season games versus some of the other conferences that have 12 regular season games?
I think we've really been intentional about treating them just like any other team and watching those games, really looking at, I know there's a small segment of non-conference opponents, but they've had great success. Princeton played Mercer, and Brown had a big victory, I think, over Rhode Island. So those are good litmus tests of quality opponents and how they played. So, really happy for Harvard. Dartmouth's in the conversation, so, we're treating them just like we would anybody else. And again, when we get down to conversations, about seeds or other things that all that weighs in, like we talked about the eye tests, the non-conference schedule, and, we're excited to have the Ivies and, having another committee member in there with a voice that really helps us make sure we get it right.
So I know injuries, you guys have come out and say injuries do play a role in how you guys view teams. How does it change a team like, let's just say, like a Western Carolina who didn't have their starting quarterback for 3 games, but are now on a big win streak? And how do you balance that with maybe a quarterback change? You look at a team like Mercer lose to Presbyterian. They make a quarterback change midseason, and now Braden Atkinson's the favorite for the Jerry Rice Award. How do you guys balance player availability, injuries in y'all's decisions?
It plays a big factor. One of the other factors with our committee is we're all assigned different conferences. And I think we meet with them every other week. And that's a big component of those conferences letting us know. I think Monmouth right now has an injury to the quarterback. We talked a lot about that. You addressed Mercer. Tarleton State had injuries to their running back as well as their quarterback. We talk a lot about that, especially, that loss against Presbyterian, who's had a great year, and they make a change, and now they're top 5 in the country in passing and total offense. Mercer, that is. So it's a big factor for us. That early season loss, again, using Mercer to Presbyterian, how does that weigh into, they're on the borderline to be a top 8 seed, so all that conversation, we really lean on those conference advisories to be able to give the committee an update, and it's really effective and adds another key to our discussion.
Mark, Ty, take us through the final Saturday before Selection Sunday. The amount of revisions you go through, just the time frame. Fortunately, it's an earlier schedule this year, so just about everybody's playing earlier. Just talk about how the night goes for you.
Well, I mean, we get together anywhere between 12 and 1 that afternoon as a committee, and Ty's generous enough to buy us lunch. So we get in the committee and get settled, and we start watching games. And we identify those games on Friday. And usually we take, I don't want to say a break. We start working about 3:00, really trying to get the at-large teams. And as automatic qualifiers come into play, we have that board. And then I would say 7:00, we really start working. I think there's 1 or 2 games that will be on. And I would say 9:00, the business gets going, as far as looking at who our top 30 are, getting it to the 24, and then obviously the seating process. I will say last year we finished, would you say, Ty, a little before 2:00 in the morning. We had everything set, and wake up early and have a discussion to make sure that there is no questions. Really, last year helping Matt Larson when he has to defend the last 4 in and the first 4 out. And so it's a lot of work. It's a lot of fun. We have a great group of people, but it's a long, fun day. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, Craig, I would add, I think what we've tried to do this year is do some of that work on Friday, as we can. I mean, we've gone through the top 10 reveal now twice. Later today we'll be on, but that's helped us, I think, recognize, maybe a little bit more discussion when we're all fresh about the top 10, top 8. Would be helpful. I don't think anything was wrong in the past, but getting that sort of discussion started on Friday when the committee members come in is a big part of what we do. And just again, behind the curtain a little bit, for Friday, a lot of our discussion is potential hosts and potential issues with campuses and challenges with hotels, all the things that are really important to the teams. We kind of flesh a lot of those out, so it's not last minute when we're really thinking about which team's going to be in or out. We don't also want to be thinking, okay, what was the issue with Campus X that we need to make sure that team knows about as they're going into travel, et cetera. So trying to do a little bit more work on that Friday, especially with the top 8.
So a follow-up on just, looking at different metrics too. So obviously the polls are not being used as one of the, I guess, things you guys look at. What do you guys use to determine quality wins? Since obviously the polls aren't used, ranked wins are hard to kind of determine. Is there a threshold set with one of the metrics? Because I think the reason I'm asking is just like Southern Utah could be a quality win for someone, even though their record isn't great because they've played everybody close. They have a few key wins. Is there a threshold set anywhere, or do you guys just use y'all's eyes and say, listen, this team might be 3-6 right now, but that's still a quality win on the road for this team in conference play?
I think we look at, you mentioned Southern Utah. They have one of the strongest schedules in the country, and they ran the gauntlet early. To came out on the other side of it, the losing side of it, but they played teams close, and I think you look at that. You look at Abilene Christian as another example. Their record might not be, stellar, but they've had 4 top 25 wins, and certainly puts them in the conversation. We have them very high, on our top 25. But we look very closely at schedules. We have a binder when we go to Indianapolis about everybody's schedule and looking at good wins, quality wins, um, you know, distance of their wins, against quality opponents. All that comes into play. But those are great examples about Southern Utah, and like I said, Abilene Christian, Austin P is another great example. So we look very thoroughly at all that.
Yeah, I would add that the regional advisory committees and all the discussions we continue to have. A team like Western Carolina has really come on with their quarterback, with et cetera. Um, a win against Western Carolina in weeks 1 or 2. We don't have a threshold for a quality win. To answer your question more directly, it really is. What was that team doing at that point? Was that a great win? Was that a good win? That can just be as big a factor as not having a quarterback or what have you. So it's unfortunately not black and white, but that's kind of what makes it fun. There's a lot of different factors that go into it.
Yes.
Zach and I are visiting with Mark Wharton, the FCS Playoff Selection Committee Chair, Ty Halpin of the NCAA. We've learned Ty will be treating for lunch on November 22nd. Wondering if Mark will be treating for dinner that night, but we'll find out later. Next question. We know that an FBS win is huge for an FCS program, and there's really no penalty if an FCS team loses to an FBS. But does the committee kind of look at losses differently? Does a close loss benefit a team as opposed to maybe a blowout loss?
It's certainly a conversation, especially when we get to Indy. Talked about FCS, schedules, but it's also looking at, non-conference. We have conversation all the time about what's a bad Division II win versus a good Division II win, a non-D1s, rather, but it's the same side of an FBS close loss. Obviously an FBS win, like Tarleton beating Army, and there's several examples out there, but we have a lot of conversations about that. And you could play a bad FCS or FBS school and have a loss. That it's always a conversation, but there's no true, factor, whether it's a non-D1 or an FBS. We really try to focus on the FCS schedule, but that's kind of sprinkling on top when we get into those discussions.
So, Ty, we all learned about the FCS showcase last week. During championship weekend, about 50 draft eligible prospects get to interview, work out with NFL teams. Can you talk about how this showcase came about and what it could really do for FCS prospects moving forward?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It really came about the HBCU combine that the NFL has run. Part of our office is part of that and helps and really talking with the NFL folks, talking with Bob Nielsen from the AFCA, the Football Coaches Association. We had some really good thoughts about, hey, this wouldn't it be it'd be helpful to a lot of our FCS programs to get their better players seen by scouts maybe in a different way. Many of the players I think that'll be invited will also be invited to the Combine in Indy, or the Senior Bowl, or some of the other events that are there. But providing something specifically for FCS players, I think talking with the NFL scouts, what the most valuable thing for them is some of the character things off the field, some of the personality testing that we can do in Nashville. Really excited about that, and providing that opportunity for kids that may get seen at a regional team day or something by a regional scout. There'll be a lot of GMs, assistant GMs coming to Nashville to be part of this. Not as much on field, too close to the season. Really, they're not going to do the 40 or a lot of that stuff. But they really, as a league, value some of the guys that may not hit the time on the stopwatch, but really are valuable to NFL teams. You see how many folks we have of the non-FBSs that are on rosters and contributing in a big way. I just felt like, and Mark and the committee, I think, was very supportive of the concept. Really trying to make Nashville a different event. Doesn't mean it was only because of Nashville. It's not what I'm saying, but the idea just kind of clicked in, and our contacts with the NFL were very supportive and kind of took the ball and ran with it.
Building on that, Nashville hosting championship week for the first time, and obviously Nashville will have it next season as well. But what is the timetable and requirements for a city with the next bid cycle that surrounds the 2027 FCS season?
Yeah, thanks, Craig. So we're in Nashville this year, and then the following year, and then right after this year, pretty much February-ish. We haven't 100% set a deadline. We will accept bids for future years, and I would anticipate a similar interest from cities nationally. We will have some that bid. The last time we were certainly inviting folks to come and see Nashville and see what the event looks like there. And from there, then the committee will narrow it down, similar to what we did last time. Have some presentations, and then determine the future couple years in the bid cycle that we're in.
How do you guys evaluate any new or additional criteria you guys may add to, or for the selection committee to consider in the future? Are there any things that you guys might be considering for future years? And how do you guys go about changing or evaluating what you guys are using year after year?
Yeah, we definitely have looked at our bid specifications pretty closely. Obviously, when we did this last one, 15 years in Frisco was all great years and tremendous experiences. Didn't really have to think about what other aspects we might add to it. I think Nashville and just the additional events like this, with the NFL showcase, and then we're actually adding a few more events to the docket. Kind of an FCS forum where ADs and commissioners, et cetera, are going to have some kind of programming about the state of our business. A lot of different factors there for professional development to kind of bring in a different approach off the field discussions and make it a bit more of a celebration of FCS. That's really what we're trying to do. There's also going to be some engagement with our NACTA AD, the ADs Association, a Coaches Connect. So future head coaches that maybe could use some engagement on that front and go through mock interviews. And for the ADs, it helps see who's an up and coming coordinator maybe or something like that. So a lot of other events that we're adding to the mix. Your question about the bid specs itself doesn't really change the hotel requirements for teams or the things that all go into that. I think that's pretty similar to what we had in Frisco, to be honest. But a big part of my job when we when we get to that weekend is making sure that those two teams have a tremendous experience, unique from the year to year. And I thought Frisco did a great job of making it different every year, even for teams that were repeat champions and appearances. We want to make sure that's different every year, but different good, not different bad.
Mark Wharton, playoffs selection committee chair, Ty Halpin of the NCAA. We certainly have enjoyed this time with you, learning about the whole process. Anything else you want to point out as what's ahead for you in the next few weeks?
Well, first, I'd just like to say thank you to you both about what you've done for FCS football, and you've made it very special, and just appreciate what you guys do. But we're excited. I've really enjoyed my 4 years on the committee. I've made long-lasting relationships with athletic directors across the country, and really have learned to appreciate what Ty and his staff have done. And I think the last 3 years we've gotten it right, and excited about this year getting it right again.
Craig, I would only add, the ESPN partnership with our windows that we have on some of the games later in the tournament, really phenomenal, and hopeful that we can continue to enhance not only those broadcasts. I think they've been very intentional about that, but like our top 10 reveals, if you watch those, they're not just listing it on camera. They've got a lot of footage, a lot of knowledge about those teams. So I really appreciate the professionalism you all provide and the effort you give. Same with ESPN. I think they've been intentional to try to grow the FCS brand and our tournament. So really excited about the Monday night window. I know there was some concern that might not be great, but the first Monday night football window that's not an NFL game. It was wonderful last year, and I'm excited to see what it looks like in Nashville this year, and appreciate your continued efforts on behalf of FCS.
Well, everybody loves Monday Night Football, and you have a tremendous tournament that's upcoming, finishing on January 5th in Nashville, Tennessee. Mark, Ty, thank you again for your time and your information here on what's ahead. Zach and I are going to take a break here, and when we come back to the FCS Edge, we're going to have our Week 11 Pick'em segment. This is the FCS Edge. Welcome back to the FCS Edge, where our third and final segment is always our Pick'em segment. Week 11. Whoa, we have a great slate of games, conference action. Let's go right to our game of the week, Zach. We've talked a lot about Mercer at Western Carolina today, a nationally ranked matchup. Great quarterback matchup. It's 2:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Plus on Saturday. The matchup, of course, is Braden Atkinson versus Teron Dickens and their teams, of course. One of the big, match of the weeks because Mercer can win the title and an auto bid to the playoffs. But Western Carolina, if they win at home, they go into the driver's seat. So tell us about this Southern Conference game.
Yeah, what a massive matchup. And I think this is the unquestioned game of the week just because, like you mentioned, the quarterback battles there, the implications on the playoff race and the conference title race are big. And I think it's huge because this is a conference that only got one bid last year. And I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case this year, Craig, but it is important to kind of, if Mercer can lock this up, you feel really good. And then what happens to Western Carolina if they win out the rest of the way? And what is their at-large bid status? I think is really important if Western loses not to get blown out. They got to keep this game close and competitive because you don't want the committee to look at your resume and be like, yeah, but when they played of Mercer, they got dismantled. And I'm going to go with Mercer here, Craig. And it's just because I think both offenses are going to be able to score. But I think Braden Atkinson's playing just as well as Teron Dickens right now. And I trust their run game a bit more. They're a bit more balanced offensively. And if I had to pick one defense that's good enough to get a stop, it's going to be Mercer's. And I do think Western Carolina could potentially struggle with that defensive line. And I think Mercer's going to try to heat Teron Dickens up and make them make decisions quickly. So I like Mercer here on the road.
Yeah, I mean, this game has 42-38 written all over it, just a back and forth kind of matchup. I think, Atkinson will probably work downfield a little more than Teron Dickens, who keeps it a little close. I think the running game is the difference. That C.J. Miller's really picked it up in the last few games for Mercer, and I mean Western. It's their defense's big moment because through the years that's been a liability. Here they're going to have to stop that run game. They still give up a decent amount of rushing yards. I just think Mercer is the better team on paper, and I think they can get it done on the road. So I'll go with the Bears as well. All right, here's another top 25 matchup. Number 1, North Dakota State. They're 9-0, 6-0 in the Missouri Valley. They can clinch the automatic bid and the championship with a win at North Dakota. Now, number 13, North Dakota handily beat them the last time they played in the Alaris Center, 49-24 2 years ago. You can't tell me that's not bulletin board material for the Bison all week, the game 2 years ago.
Yeah, and I think last week you saw like Youngstown had an opportunity to win that game against the Bison, and I do wonder, and no one hasn't really talked about this. Was that a little bit of a marker hangover game for the Bison? I don't think they overlooked Youngstown. Youngstown's a good team, but Craig, we know how it is coming off of rivalry games. It's highly emotional. It's hard not to just have a little bit of a letdown. I think last week scared the Bison a little bit, and it's kind of funny, Craig, when I approached picking this game. If North Dakota State blew out Youngstown last week, I might have went UND here just because this could have been the trap game. I think the Bison survived their trap game last week against Youngstown State. I think they go in looking to make a statement in the Alaris Center, and I do wonder how that South Dakota loss is weighing on North Dakota just because, Craig, you look at all 3 of their losses, they probably feel like they should have won all 3 of those games because they were just shooting themselves in the foot in all 3 of those games. But I think Cole Payton and the defensive line for North Dakota State is a difference here. Give me the Bison on the road. And I know I've been a road warrior too many times on this show, Craig, and I'm a little nervous here because that's 2 road picks already.
Well, I'll tell you, UND basically held LJ Phillips of South Dakota in check, relatively speaking. They did almost everything that they could do to win, except for too big of a deficit to overcome, and they just kind of ran out of time. So yeah, you gotta like their chances at home, but at the same time, it's hard to pick against the Bison any time and anywhere. So I'll go the Bison as well. All right, let's stay in the Missouri Valley Conference. Let's go to number 15 Southern Illinois at number 21 Youngstown State. You've talked about Bo Brungard. Tell us who's your pick here.
Yeah, I like Youngstown State at home, Craig. Look at the 3 quarterback battles we have just got to talk about with Kaminsky versus Peyton, with Atkinson versus Teron Dickens, and now look at this one, Bro Bungard versus DJ Williams, 2 of the most dynamic quarterbacks in the country. The thing is, as I trust Youngstown's defense just a little bit more to make some stops, I think SIU is going to really, really struggle keeping Brungard from finding his rhythm here. So give me Youngstown at home, bounce back after a loss last week to NDSU.
Great matchup. I remember somebody back in August was telling me all about the Salukis of being overlooked. I wonder who that could be, Zach. I'm gonna go.
It
I'm
was
gonna go
it was me.
Salukis. I'm gonna go Salukis on the road. I'm gonna listen to you back in August. All right, let's stay in the Missouri Valley Conference. Another big matchup: South Dakota State at South Dakota. I mean, the health of Chase Mason is just huge because you're also going against Aiden Bowman of South Dakota here. Who's going to get it done in this matchup?
Man, I went back and forth with this one. I know you know this because you asked me for my picks, and I was like, hang on, I need to look at a few things. I'm going to make a bold prediction here. I actually think Chase Mason plays this weekend. I think they kept him out last week because they thought they had Indiana State, and it kind of backfired. I think they know they need this win because if South Dakota State loses out, Craig, and something crazy happens, I don't think they're necessarily a lock for the playoffs. And so I think they know they need this one. So give me South Dakota State, big road win. Chase Mason comes back, plays well, and I think the Jacks defense makes a statement this weekend.
Just hearing the talk of 5 straight losses for the Jackrabbits is just mind-blowing. Not going to happen. I'll say they get it done here as well. All right, let's go down to the Southland Conference. Southeastern Louisiana is at Lamar. And in conference, Lamar suffered its first loss last week, so this is a must-win against Southeastern Louisiana. Now, let me ask you this: there's a reason this game is behind the South Dakota State South Dakota game that we just talked about. Can you make the connection? It's a quiz.
Yeah, it's because Lamar beat South Dakota.
That is one, but nope. the last time South Dakota beat South Dakota State, 2021, Carson Camp was the quarterback throwing the
Oh, that's
Hail
hilarious.
Mary. And now he's the quarterback, one of two quarterbacks for Southeastern Louisiana. He kind of rotates with Kyle Lau. But yes, the last time South Dakota beat South Dakota State, it was Carson Camp of Lamar getting it done. I'm going to go, I think it's a great matchup. I'm going to go with the Carson Camp throwing a Hail Mary to win this one as well.
I don't think they're going to need a Hail Mary. I think Southeastern Louisiana dominates this game again. I think they make a statement. Craig, I've been so confused from voters on the disrespect for Southeastern Louisiana. Their resume is literally almost identical to Tennessee Tech, and they have just continuously, like, I've seen voters have them in the 20s still. I'm like, I don't know exactly what they're watching. I think if you just replace those two FBS games with two average FCS teams, this team is undefeated right now. I love Jalen at wide receiver for them. You mentioned Carson Camp, and I think their defense has the best defensive tackle in the country and Caleb Proctor on it. I think Southeastern Louisiana dominates this game and makes another statement.
Fun game for sure. All right, let's go to the CAA. Monmouth, you talk about quarterback injuries. Derek Robertson's been out for a little while now. Frankie Weaver took a big step on the road last week when they beat Bryant. The Hawks are hosting New Hampshire. It's a good game for sure. The Hawks up to number 7. I think the Hawks, though, at home get it done.
I do too. I think the fact that they have a rushing attack with Rodney Nelson is so big right now. And then also, too, Frankie Weaver surrounded by arguably one of the best receiving corps in the country. I like Monmouth to get this one done. I just don't trust New Hampshire to win a game of this size. They have not performed well against really good teams this year. So I like Monmouth here.
Well, we know about rivalries. There's a good one that's taking place in Missoula. They're hosting Eastern Washington. It's the 51st meeting. We talk about chaos in rivalry games, but I do find it hard to believe that Eastern Washington can stop the Montana offense. I'm going to go with the Grizz. How about you?
Yeah, II is playing outstanding. You talk about All-American quarterbacks. He's having an All-American season, and Michael Wortham is probably going to score another 3 touchdowns, and who knows if they're going to be kickoff returns, who knows if they're going to be punt returns, who knows if he's running the ball, throwing the ball, catching the ball. He's going to find a way to get 200 all-purpose yards. Give me Montana.
He's going to be spotlighted against his former team, Eastern Washington, for sure. All right, staying out in the Big Sky, UC Davis coming off a surprising loss to Idaho State. Now they're at Idaho, coming off a surprising win at Northern Arizona. Who's going to win this one?
Yeah, I like UC Davis here. I know it's a tough road game going to the Kibbie Dome, but I think Caden Pennick bounces back. And the one thing I am a little bit concerned about with UC Davis is the injuries are starting to mount. Porter Connors has been out. Rex Connors has been out. But listen, I love that defensive line. Jacob Sisk there on the defensive line has been outstanding. They have a really solid rushing attack. I think the offense for UC Davis is the key in this one. So I like the Aggies on the road.
Well, I'm going to go with the home dome pick here. I'll take the Vandals at home. I think it's a great matchup. I mean, certainly UC Davis can get it done with Caden Pennick on the road, but I'm going to go with the Vandals. All right, here's another one. Pioneer League. Terrific matchup. St. Thomas is 6-3 and 4-2 in the league, but they're at Drake, which is 5-0 in the league. Get this, for St. Thomas, they end against at Drake, hosting Presbyterian, at North Dakota State. Those opponents are 23-3, by far the toughest or the highest winning percentage of your final 3 opponents out of anybody. And you know what? I'm going to take St. Thomas on the road. With Andy Peters really having some spectacular games behind center for the Tommies, I'm going to say they knock off Drake.
Your fun fact of the show, because I talked about this on another show last week. Do you know that Joe Woodley, who's the new head coach of Drake, has never lost a conference game in his entire coaching career?
No.
He was 29-0 in conference at Grandview at the NAIA level. He was 29-0, never lost a conference game, finished 72-5. He's 5-0 now in conference. So, Craig, he's 34-0 in conference games. The streak lives on. I picked Drake to win the Pioneer to start the year. Give me Drake in another dominant win.
Well, I'm going to go with the lack of knowledge on that one and just stick with the Tommies, but that's a great fact. All right, let's go to the MEAC. One of the biggest surprises of the year, the most improved team win-wise. Delaware State 6-3. They're 2-0 in the league, a top top the MEAC with South Carolina. They're at Morgan State. A little bit of a down year. We know about their defense. The Hornets, probably too much offense for Morgan State, which tends to struggle offensively.
Yeah, I do like the change at quarterback. Listen, Raymond Moore has been playing much better for Morgan State, redshirt freshman, but Craig, this run game has been outstanding. Nemo Washington and that offensive staff has been outstanding. Marquise Gillis, a stud. Caden Bennett continues to make plays when he needs to. And this defense, Craig, statistically is not very good, but every time they need a stop, they find a way to get a key stop somewhere. I think Delaware State keeps rolling, and we're going to start to have a celebration bowl conversation about Del State, which is something that, as someone who covers HBC football very in depth, never thought I'd be saying in my lifetime, that we'd be talking about Delaware State going to the Celebration Bowl. But here we are, year one with Deshaun Jackson.
So much attention was on Michael Vick in the offseason that none of us realized how good Deshaun Jackson had how good of a lineup he had put together for this season. What a year they've had. All right, week 11, it's upon us. Can it be? Well, there's no way it could be as chaotic as week 10, right?
I mean, as a voter, Craig, I'm just going to let you know, if it's more chaotic, I'm going to opt out of my ballot next week. I'll catch back up with you in week 12.
Instead of 56 ballots cast, well, people will be like, why is there only 23 ballots cast this week? We'll find out. All right, so this has been a fun episode of the FCS Edge. Obviously, having Mark Wharton, the selection committee chair, and Ty Halpin of the NCAA, great conversation, very informative. Learned a lot going into week 11 towards the 2014 playoff field that'll be announced on November 23rd, the pairings. Looking forward to it. We thank you, our listeners and our watchers here at the FCS Edge. We thank Graham Bell for producing it. Zach, I'm looking forward to it. My head's still spinning. I'm sure yours is. And we'll be back next week to talk more FCS football with the FCS Edge.